the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday night. Sorry it's a little later than usual, and I appreciate you guys who are here live and sticking with it in spite of the late hour. It's already 8:30 p.m. on the East Coast. A little earlier around the country, but very late in Europe. We're probably not going to get any Europeans listening in. All right, so today we are going to talk about the dollar. We're going to talk about the dollar's present, future. Reserve currency, is that going to go away? What's going to happen? Is Bitcoin going to win? Is it we're going to go for gold standard? What's the future of the dollar? Or more generally, what is the future of money is going to be our topic today. Remind everybody that yes, you can ask questions. Questions are great because they help to shape the show. You get to direct where we go, at least after the material that I want to cover is covered. So please feel free to use the super chat feature and ask as many questions as you like. Preference is given to those questions that are $20 and above. I did get into trouble, I think, today. I usually do. I do this. This is self-inflicted, real damage that I do, like constantly on the show, and that is a lot of people are unhappy with me for the review of the song. What was the song? North of Richmond, rich people north of Richmond, rich people north of Richmond. Yeah, people unhappy because I'm not sympathetic to the working class who are struggling. I'm not sympathetic to young people who are being oppressed by the system and who are being put in their place and who are truly victims of the culture and the society and the economy. And look, my feelings about, or my thoughts about this are mixed. On the one hand, absolutely, we live in a crummy world in many respects. We live in a world in which we have an awful philosophy. We live in a world in which we've moved way away from any semblance of free markets or capitalism or free enterprise or whatever you want to call it. We're becoming a more and more statist, more and more regulated, more and more controlled, more and more taxed. Our lives are being under control constantly, and but more importantly than that, I think, if there is something more important than that, we are being taught a rotten philosophy of life. We are being taught a philosophy of life where we should be expecting to be taken care of. We're taught a philosophy of life that says that we do not have the capacity to take care of ourselves. We're taught a philosophy of life that says that emotions are what matter, not reason, not thought, not knowledge, but emotions, that expertise, knowledge are irrelevant, and what matters is emotions. Our dominant philosophy is a philosophy of egalitarianism. Everybody is the same. Everybody should be treated the same. Don't judge. Don't discriminate. And don't think for yourself. So we live in a society that treats its young people horribly, just horribly. And it's a society that makes it very difficult for, I think, particularly young people, because they've recently gone through the educational system, an educational system that is to a large extent, anti-human, or anti-knowledge, anti-reason, anti-thought. They've recently gone through this educational system, and they're struggling. They're struggling. But their struggles are not because of rich people. And their struggles are not because their wages are too low. And their struggles too low based on what? And their struggles are not, something they can't do anything about if they choose to. Yes, the system is against you. Yes, the education that you're receiving is against you. But what are you going to do? Well, roll over and play dead? Roll over and complain? Roll over and accuse everybody around you? Yeah, a political class, left and right, distorting and perverting and stealing and thieving and taking our stuff from us. And what is the solution to that? What is the solution to that? To complain about rich people? The solution to that is to stand up. It's to declare them crooks. It's to fight the establishment, but not to fight the establishment by establishing your own establishment. You don't drain the swamp by bringing to the party swamp animals. You drain the swamp, you challenge the authorities, you challenge the world by presenting an alternative. By ridding the world of the statists. And you do that with a agenda of objective reality, truth, and limiting government, shrinking government. And establishing freedom to make your own choices. And in challenging the culture with something better. Not with the same old, not with the same garbage, not with the same garbage just from a different angle. Not with complaints and bitterness about the work that you do and the wages you earn. By getting rid, and not by, in a sense, implying it's your employers that are at fault, but by getting rid of the entire regulatory, administrative state that oppresses us and restricts our ability to make a living. And I'm sorry, but that song is pathetic. It's another example of victim culture with no solutions, no ideas, blame placed in the wrong place, and playing into a right-wing culture that has no solutions, but wants to take us back to 1220. So, yeah. What we need is liberty. What we need is a liberty movement. But that means a liberty movement. That means an understanding what liberty is. That means understanding what freedom is. That means understanding what personal responsibility is, what it means to take responsibility for your own life. And if you're going to bitch and complain, then bitch and complain about the right things. Bitch and complain about the right people. And offer solutions. But it's a song that's being held up as an anthem. If it was just a song, I never comment on country music songs. There are lots of terrible country music songs. There are a few good ones, lots of terrible ones. But it's held up as an anthem now. It's held up as, look, isn't this amazing? And you should see the crap I got in the comment section and in my Twitter feed. So I'm just responding to the stuff in my Twitter feed and in my comment section. You don't want me to respond? Don't leave comments. All right, but I will do a longer show because I think this whole issue of alienation, I think the issue of death to despair, I think the issue of suicide, I think the issue of people feeling alienated and in despair and not understanding the world around them, and feeling screwed, the whole rise of populism, the whole phenomena of mindlessly following a leader, all of them are symptoms of real cultural decay. They're all symptoms of the manifestation of statism, socialism, altruism, and emotionalism that have been cultivated in this country for the last 100 years. And we're reaping the benefits, or we're suffering the consequences of that. This is not divorced at all. This is 100% consistent with the collectivism, the altruism, the emotionalism that we've been taught, we've been preached. And the statism, explicit statism, the promises, the betrayal that keeps happening. All right, I need to stop there because I could do the show right now. And no, I said I would do a show in the future. So I will do a show. I want to look at what Matt Walsh has to say about this anthem. I want to be able to critique that video. I want to look at some of the other people and what they're talking about this, and then I want to think through. I've got that Nathaniel Branden article in Capitalism Not an Ideal, which is very good. That I want to reread and do a better case articulating it to you. I've done that before in the past, but anyway, let's go back to the dollar. Let's shift our complaining to the dollar. The dollar is the currency which we use. I believe that I agree with Ludwig von Mises. Money is the medium of exchange. It is. There is no such thing as intrinsic money. There is no such thing as it's what the market chooses to use as a medium of exchange. And in the absence of a market, or if the market is not allowed to function, it is what the government has chosen. You could say this is a fake money, and in a sense it is, because the government has chosen it, not the market. But it's what is commonly used as a medium of exchange. That is the reality. So I'm on Mises' side on this, and I think he's absolutely right. The used medium of exchange globally is the dollar. I mean, the dollar serves as about 60% of all foreign exchange reserves in the world. Global trade that crosses borders is almost all denominated in dollars. You hear once in a while there's a story about China and Saudi Arabia cutting a deal to denominate the purchases of oil by the Chinese government in yuan. And the reason you read about it is because it's so unusual and it's so rare. And the reality is that it's absolutely meaningless. It's politically meaningful. It symbolizes Saudi Arabia being closer to China and sending a message to the Biden administration that you better be nice to us, which they are now. So Biden is towing the line. He's coming, and he's now best friends with the Saudis. You remember when he was elected, he was like, "Oh no, the Saudis are bad. They're evil. They killed that Washington Post journalist." Slaughtered him, not just killed him, and therefore I'm going to treat them really, really badly. Well, he's learned his lesson. He's learned a lesson. Unless you have some principle by which you're going to evaluate other countries, better not challenge the Saudis. They'll screw you by raising all prices. They'll screw you by limited supply. They can't raise the price, but they can limit supply, and they'll cozy up the Chinese. So better behave. So yeah, Biden is behaving, and the reward he's getting is maybe some deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia that he can pretend to take credit for. But the fact is that the world economy today runs on dollars. If Chile and Vietnam, if people in Chile and people in Vietnam are signing a contract to exchange goods, it's not done in Vietnamese currency. It's not done in Chilean currency. It's transacted in dollars. And the reason is that in spite of all our complaining about the dollars, all justified, in spite of the inflation, in spite of the decline in the purchasing power of the dollar domestically in the United States over the last 100 years, relative to other currencies, relative to every other currency out there, the dollar is unbelievably stable. And not only is the dollar stable relative to these other currencies, but the dollar is backed by a massive, the world's largest economy, and the world's most stable economy, in spite of its ups and downs, still a relatively stable economy. Just imagine what it's like in other countries. So if I sell something in Chile or in Vietnam or whatever I'm selling, and I get dollars in my hands, what am I worried about if I get a foreign currency in my hand? I can't spend it in Vietnam. I can't spend it in Chile. So what am I worried about? One, I'm worried about, is this going to be worth about the same tomorrow as it is today? Like, I don't want Argentinian pesos, right? Because tomorrow, it's worth a lot less than it is today. 116% inflation. Interest rates in Argentina just went up to 120% or 118%, right? So the dollar, yeah, there's inflation, but overall, it's about the same value tomorrow as it is today. Second, what can I do with these dollars? I'm not going to put them in my vault. I want to do something with them. Can I do something with them to earn me a return? Yeah, I can buy U.S. government bonds. A U.S. government bond safe? Yeah, of all the bonds out there in the world, even though the ratings has come down, the United States is the safest, or as safe as anywhere else, at least has been historically. We'll talk about the future. So I can go buy U.S. treasuries. I can buy corporate bonds. I can buy mortgage-backed securities. I can buy a lot of different things with these dollars. I can invest in the American stock market. I can, if I accumulate enough of these dollars, I can go buy an American company. I can buy real estate in America. I can buy land. Lots of things I can do with these dollars. And indeed, I don't even have to take the dollars to the U.S. I can take these dollars and buy something from my friends in Australia, and they'll take the U.S. dollars. Why will they take the U.S. dollars? For the same reason. They don't lose a lot of value, and if they want to invest them, they can invest them easily in the United States, or they can take it to the bank. They can easily exchange them to a local currency. There's just no other currency in the world that has that. Now, the euro is pretty good, and that's why, a significant percent of global reserves and some percentage of trade happens in the euros, about 20% of global reserves in the euros. But that's about it. You've got the yen and the pound. They're at under 10%, about 10% under 10%, about 5% of global reserves. But that's about it. And the reason is that if I sell something to Chinese and they send me yuan, I've got these yuans in my hand. I don't know what they're worth. I don't know what I can buy with them. Do I want to own Chinese government bonds if I send them to China? Do I want to own Chinese government bonds denominated yuans? Do I trust the Chinese? Chinese economy has done well in the past. Will it do well in the future? How committed how committed am I to the yuan, Chinese currency? How confident am I in its value, in my purchasing power, ability to use these yuans to buy stuff, even in China? Well, people are not, and justifiably so. China's an authoritarian regime. Anything could change tomorrow. They could change the currency rates. Currency capital controls are not free. So if I have yuan in the United States and I want to exchange it for dollars, the Chinese government might say tomorrow, you can't do that. We don't allow changing yuan to dollars. Could happen tomorrow. It won't happen tomorrow, but it could happen one of these days. Interest rates could go up. Interest rates could go down. They just went down a lot. I mean, the Chinese economy is really struggling, much worse than what people predicted a few months ago. Certainly worse than what people predicted a year ago, except for me. I predicted this, right? Chinese economy is doing really, really badly right now. Massive problems. Are these yuans worth anything? I certainly don't want to hold. Do I want to hold municipal bonds in China? They can't pay them back. Do I want to own land in China? Do I want to own condos in China? Nobody wants to own stuff in China. Unless you're a business that wants to sell into the Chinese market. So where do you want to own stuff? Well, if you have a diversified portfolio, you might want to own some euros because, European Union is not going to disappear. It's a large economy. It's fairly stable. It's not run by an autocrat. It's diversified because you have all these different countries, and some of them might not do too well. I don't know, Italy, but Germany right now, but France is doing okay, and Poland is doing great, and so on. So it's a pretty diversified place. So you don't mind holding euros. British pound, economy's not doing great, but the British pound's been there forever. It's not going to go away tomorrow, and they're not going to do something crazy like the Chinese might. Same with Japan. So whether people want to hold your currency depends a lot about to what extent do they trust the government that in the world in which we live, the currency represents. The currency is backed by. And the more authoritarian the government, the less they're willing to trust it. So is the dollar going to be replaced by the yuan? No. Not in my lifetime, or not in the next 10 years. Who knows? China might embrace laissez-faire capitalism, go on a gold standard, and everybody will want the yuan. But probably not. Is the world going to go on the ruble? Russia. A lot of Americans would love some rubles. They love Russia. No, the ruble is like this incredibly weak currency. Again, it's run by a completely authoritarian regime. They could do anything, and they could impose capital controls. They're already talking about it today, and there was talk about potential capital controls imposed by the central bank. They haven't done it yet, but they could, and there's talk about it. If you have capital controls, you can't get your capital out. Nobody wants to hold rubles. Nobody wants to hold Saudi money. Nobody wants to hold. There's this talk about the Brics. The Brics are going to replace. They're going to decide on a new currency and replace. They're going to adopt gold. Of course, they're not going to adopt gold. Why would they not adopt gold? Why won't authoritarian governments adopt gold as their currency and back their currency with gold? Because the whole point of going off a gold standard, the whole point of having fiat money is to give government absolute control over it. It's to give government the ability to control interest rates. It's to give government the ability to control the money supply. It's to allocate money, to give favors, to bail people out. Look what China's doing. China's spreading money around all over the place, bailing people out. It's funny to me that people think the Chinese economy is in better shape than the American economy, and have thought this for 15 years, that they somehow delinked and China's the story of the future. No way. It's authoritarian. It's almost totalitarian, and it's clearly dictatorial, and those economies never do well long term. So if you go on a gold standard, you lose control. And no dictator wants to lose control. So the government of China, the government of Brazil, these are the Brics, right? B is Brazil, C is China. The government of India is the closest, the freest of all of them. The government of South Africa, the government of Russia, they're not going to go on a gold standard and lose control over their currency any more than the U.S. government is going to go on a gold standard and lose control over its currency. That would be politicians reducing their power. When does that happen? That's a revolution. And it's not going to come from Moscow or Beijing. And that's why there is no currency in the world that can replace the dollar right now. It's not going to be the yuan. It's not going to be the ruble. It's not going to be some new currency the Brics invent. Even if they do invent such a currency, it won't work. Nobody will want it. Nobody wants a currency backed by South Africa. They're nuts over there. Racist nuts on top of it. Right? And they're authoritarian. And they're statist. So this whole Brics is just a crazy. Again, it's not exactly conspiracy theory. It's like a conspiracy theory. It's playing pretend. People tell me, "Ooh, they're buying lots of gold." Are they? I mean, I look at how much gold is held by central banks, and guess which central bank has the most gold in the world? By a long shot, not even close. Who has the most gold in the world? By far, it's the United States. By far. And then it's Germany, Italy, France. And only then you get to Russia and China. So yeah, I'm sure they're buying gold. Sometimes. Not right now, probably. Although it's not a bad way to get your currency into the market if people are willing to take yuans for gold. Maybe it's a way that China's trying to inflate its currency. So Brics is not going to do it. The euro, there was a lot of hope for the euro when the euro came out. The eurozone is massive. It's a relatively robust economy. It's relatively stable. Inflation in the eurozone is a little higher than the U.S., but not much. And the hope was, when the euro first came into being, that the European Central Bank would be run by the Germans. And the Germans, Germany, it's interesting. Germany is the one country that during the 1970s had no inflation. It's the one country that learned the lesson of the inflation of the 1920s in Germany and refused to inflate, and did a phenomenal job, the central bank did, in the 1970s. But then they gave it all up by joining a eurozone, by creating the euro. And initially everybody thought, oh, the Germans will control it. And I think there was a lot of optimism that the euro would take on the dollar and replace the dollar. But then it turned out that once in a while a Frenchman ran the European Bank. And then people got skeptical. And of course, the European Bank has to deal with things like Greece and the Greek financial crisis, and Italy and debt crisis, and banks in Spain going under. And suddenly even Germans can't handle all of that. And the consequence are that the euro is viewed as less stable than the dollar, less reliable than the dollar. And what do you buy if you've got euros and you want to buy bonds in Europe? You're buying German bonds, or Italian bonds, or Spanish bonds, Greek bonds. A lot of people bought Greek bonds. It didn't work out very well for them. So people go out and buy these bonds. And they're now very much linked to these independent economies, and these independent economies are not Europe. They might be bailed out by Europe, but they're not Europe, and there's real risk involved. And do you really want to own assets in Italy or Spain or even Germany right now? Germany's going through a recession right now, is in real trouble. I talked about this in one of the shows. The German economy is not doing well. So again, there is no deep liquid market for euro-backed securities. Like in the dollar has the most liquid market in securities, in bonds. It's the most stable, liquid market. Now, it's, I would argue, a lot of free market people would argue, it's not good. The dollar's not good money. It's bad money, but it's the best we have. It's the best we have given the system of government coercion in the world today. So there's just no competition, not from Brics and not from the euro. So, it's also the case that, much of the international financial system, money transfers, the way things are connected, the Bank of International Settlements, the bank that kind of not regulates, but kind of settles transactions between central banks. All of that is denominated in dollars. All of that is functions through dollars. So what would it take to replace it? Well, I mean, obviously, one thing that could happen is the dollar could collapse. And you have to wonder, and I'm not surprised that so many people constantly predict the dollar collapsing, because God, it's pretty amazing it hasn't collapsed. It should collapse in some way. You would expect it to collapse. I mean, think of all the trillions of debt that we have. And at some point, if nothing happens, it will collapse. But even if it collapses, right now the United States has anywhere between 100 to 200 trillion dollars of unfunded liabilities. In present value terms, I'm talking about present value, the value of all the promises we've made into the future, minus the present value of all the taxes we intend to collect in the future, let's say in the next 70 years, 70. That comes out to about negative $100 trillion. So at some point, it's possible that we just collapse under the weight of that. We just can't pay it back. We start printing money like crazy. Inflation goes through the roof. And the dollar just is eviscerated because it's worthless. But what's going on with the euro at the same time? What's going on in China when the dollar collapses? What's going on in South Africa and Brazil when the United States economy is just in freefall? Do you think they're all thriving and doing well? I mean, the reality is, and I know a lot of free market people don't like to admit this, and a lot of libertarians in particular who are suspect of America always don't like to admit this. The reality is that America is the productive energy of the world. And the reality is that while we have horrible unfunded liabilities, so does Europe. Not quite as big in terms of numbers, but still big because they have a lot of pensions. They've promised their old people a really relatively high standard of living well into old age. And as people live longer, who's going to pay all that? Young people in Europe? What young people? Maybe migrants? If they get a job, if they actually work, if they're productive. But a lot of the migrants, because of the way they're assimilated or not assimilated, are not working or not being very productive, therefore not creating a lot of wealth to be taxed to pay for old people. China is going to bail the world out. China is going to be in great shape when the United States is collapsing. How is that? China has a shrinking population, a growing authoritarian regime, a shrinking market for innovation. Do you know that there are Chinese now? This is a new phenomenon over the last few years. Chinese families, singles, men, women, Chinese, are flying into places like Ecuador and Colombia, getting on little boats to Panama, crossing the jungle, some of the most dangerous, horrific, horrible jungle in the world, to get to Central America, and then trekking up through the deserts and dealing with the gangs and dealing with the crime and the murder and the rape just to get to the United States. And we're not talking about Venezuelans. We're not talking about Cubans, although they're represented. We're not talking about even Ecuadorians and Colombians and Brazilians and Argentinians, although to some extent they're represented so. We're talking about Chinese are crossing the Pacific Ocean. They can't get into America, so they're going to South America and walking. We're taking boats all the way up to America and crossing it and becoming illegal immigrants or applying for asylum in the United States. That's how desperate they are to get out of China. And you think the Chinese economy can survive the collapse of the American economy? So, in the short run, there is no alternative to the dollar. Even if the dollar is in really bad shape, every other currency in the world will be in worse. There's just no alternative. As bad as regulations and taxes and everything people want to blame on the United States, it's just as bad everywhere else, if not worse. The difference between Americans and, let's say, Europeans or Asians is that Americans are ambitious, and the reason we commit suicide and death to despair and all of that is because we're ambitious, and when ambition gets throttled, we get really, really depressed and we commit suicide. People who don't have high expectations, who are not very ambitious, when their lives get throttled, they just go on anyway, and they're satisfied and they rank high in happiness studies. But it's not because their lives are better. It's because their expectations are lower. So no, there is no replacing the dollar in the short run. What will replace the dollar in the long run? And we'll get to Bitcoin in a minute. What will replace the dollar in the long run is a philosophical change in the culture. There's no alternative to that. And it won't replace the dollar. It will just put the dollar on the correct footing and leave the dollar to the marketplace. So the dollar could collapse. The US economy probably will collapse at some point, but so will the rest of the world. It's not going to be pretty when it happens. I don't know when it's going to happen. I've seen too many people make predictions about this and fall flat on their face. So I'm not going to try and make predictions because I'm no better than they are. But I can tell you that it usually takes longer than everybody expects. It's already taken at least 40 years longer than most people expected 40 years ago. So the world will stay a dollar world for the foreseeable future. The dollar is only getting stronger vis-a-vis the ruble, vis-a-vis the yen, vis-a-vis the yuan. The dollar is only getting stronger. I mean, it's getting a little weaker vis-a-vis the euro, but it's already quite strong vis-a-vis the euro and vis-a-vis the pound. The dollar will stay the reserve currency of the world for a long time. I don't know how long, but a long time. The damage of all the mismanagement of the dollar, of QE, of playing around with interest rates, of pretending that you know what you're doing when you're centrally planning, is not collapse. The American people are too productive. The system, the freedom that we have, allows us too much flexibility and resilience. And we overcome. In spite of the song, we overcome. So what really happens, and this is harder to overcome because we don't even realize it's happening, is stagnation. It's just very little growth, very little improvement. And this is where people are going to start resenting it, because people who are, particularly people who are poor, they need economic growth in order to rise up, in order to improve their place in life. They need the jobs to be there, productivity to increase. They need robots. They need AI. They need mechanization. They need technology. They need immigrants. They need immigrants, even though they complain bitterly about them. They need them, because that's what drives economic growth. And if there's no economic growth, then they start being upset, and they start resenting it, and they start yelling and screaming and blaming everybody around them, particularly the rich men north of Richmond. And it creates real angst, which creates kind of a real populism, which creates presidential candidates that cannot fix the problem and only make it worse, because they build walls and they regulate businesses and they stop and they want to regulate technology and they limit the use of AI, and they limit the use of all other things, and that only creates more angst and more trouble and more concern. And the next step is, okay, we need more power, we need more authoritarians, we need more powerful people north of Richmond to impose on us and make us, and so you get authoritarianism, and then over time, people just are dulled to the experience of, to put it in the song's term, a shitty world. It's not your wages that are shitty, it's the world that is shitty. So the real outcome of the horrible economic policies and the dollar unconnected to reality and not anchored to something like gold is slow erosion in economic growth, slow stagnation, and you know, a static. And a static world is a dead world. And it's just going to be a slow decline. And maybe there'll be a cliff at some point and we'll fall off a cliff. But I think much more likely it's a slow decline. To change that, we need to rethink liberty, rethink freedom, rethink the nature of government, and rethink the nature of money. But you're not going to rethink the nature of money independent of the nature of government. There's no rethink the nature of money without rethinking. And this is the part of the problem with Bitcoin. You know, money is not independent of the social system in which it exists. If we have a political system, a social system that believes that government should control our lives, our culture believes that, in significant ways, should reallocate wealth, should regulate businesses, should control, should help people out when they're suffering, should make sure that economic cycles are not too deep, that recessions are not too deep, that that people are bailed out when they lose their jobs, that we have insurance, that we have Social Security, we have Medicare, we have healthcare, we have all these things. You cannot have sound money. There is no such thing as sound money. And the government will not tolerate Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not allow the government to control money. The algorithm controls the money. The amount of money, how it's used. The market controls it. So I have no problem. People will use Bitcoin, maybe. But the government's never going to allow it to become an alternative to the dollar. And to the extent that it becomes a threat to the dollar, the government will shut it down. Enough people tell me they can't shut it down, distributed networks. You are naive, in my view. You're naive in terms of what a gun can do, what a sledgehammer can do, what shutting down electricity can do. Oh, they'll never shut down electricity. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. If their power is at stake, if they think they're going to lose it, if they think the market's going to take over, if they're going to take the one leverage they have over the economy, they're going to let crypto or Bitcoin just roll? No. Right now, they're trying to figure out how to regulate it. They're trying to figure out how to control it. They've already, tried to go after a variety of different cryptos. They've left Bitcoin mostly alone, but they made it very difficult for a lot of banks to deal with Bitcoin. Big banks are fighting back a little bit. They want to get into the business. They see profit opportunity. And as long as the government views it as a game, as long as people pay taxes on their gains when there are gains, the government will let it happen. But if the government thinks that this is a real threat to the dollar, it's toast. I mean, imagine a world in which the government says it's illegal to buy anything. It's illegal to sell anything, not to buy anything. It's illegal to sell anything for euros, for Bitcoin. Can't sell it for Bitcoin. Can they actually enforce that? Yeah. When you buy stuff, then maybe they can enforce it in the dark web. All right. Bitcoin is a great money for the dark web. But can they enforce it in the actual physical world? Yeah. They could tell Tesla, if you sell cars for Bitcoin, we'll shut you down. Or we'll fine you $1 gazillion. They could tell the grocery store, if you take Bitcoin for food, we'll shut you down. So my Bitcoin friend says, they'll use it in El Salvador. So what? But El Salvador is such a small economy, it doesn't make any difference. And as soon as people get Bitcoin in El Salvador, if they can, they'll convert it into dollars. So Bitcoin is not going to replace the dollar, anytime soon. And to replace the dollar is going to require, as I said, a philosophical change. A change about individualism, the capacity of an individual to take care of himself, his moral right to do so, the moral evil that is entailed in coercion, the moral evil that is entailed in paternalism, the moral evil that's entailed in regulating and controlling our lives. That's what's required. And then once we understand that the role of government is a limited role, and that it has no business in business, including in banking, then we can have a discussion about the best way to think about money. And ultimately, I believe money, is what it's always been. It has to be a commodity. It has to have some value beyond its use as money itself. It has to be, limited in supply. All the things. It has to be easy to transport. All the things that we know about money. And I believe that if you leave the market alone, if you get government out of the business of money, if we go back to a better system than the 19th century, but a system that relies on private banks to issue currency, money will be gold. Now, it might be something else. There's nothing metaphysical about gold that requires it to be the money. And then once the United States converts to gold as money, and once the United States as a government gets out of the business of money, it might collect, it might say, look, we take gold as the currency, and the government might set, a certain value to gold. But the marketplace will say, maybe gold, it turns out, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm missing something about Bitcoin. And maybe at that point, Bitcoin will become money. And maybe it won't be Bitcoin. Maybe something similar to Bitcoin. Or something different, some other crypto, or maybe a crypto related to gold somehow. I don't know. But let's have competing currencies and let's figure it out. The market figures it out. Not philosophers figure it out, but the market figures it out. But the money has to have certain characteristics, fundamental characteristics, that preserve a stable value over time. And that people are willing to accept and recognize it, that it does not require coercion. It does not require force, which is what the dollar requires. But that, of course, means that the entire philosophical shift, not about money, but about life, about the role of government. Thank you, Wes. Really appreciate it. Wes just did a $100 sticker. Catherine, thank you. WCZN, thank you. Let's see who else. All right, the rest of the questions. So thank you. So we're We've got a few super chat questions. I know it's late, but I started late, so I'm certainly open to more questions if you have them. I want to make sure I've covered all the questions that Alexis had. Where are we heading? I mean, we're heading towards stagnation and just slow erosion. I think that's where we're heading culturally, and I think that's where we're heading economically. Would it fail ultimately? Yeah, I think the entire economy will fail ultimately, but what replaces it is just worse, something worse probably, before we get something better. And we should save it, but the way to save it is to save the economy, and which means to save our culture, which means to save us philosophically. Yeah, I mean, somebody says your argument against Bitcoin applies to gold. I agree. That's why gold is not money, and it's not going to be money anytime soon. I agree completely. As long as we have a statist government, as long as we have the kind of government we have today, Bitcoin will not be money, and neither will gold. In a free market, free banking, complete freedom, in a competition between gold and Bitcoin, I believe gold wins, and I believe gold wins easily. I believe gold is much better money than Bitcoin. Primarily because it's tangible and because it's not finite. It does grow. The quantity of gold does grow with the economy, which I think is a virtue, not a vice. I think the fact that Bitcoin is finite, not just finite growth, but finite, stops growing at some point, is a problem with Bitcoin. And this is why other crypto money might be more interesting. But ultimately, what you'll get is you'll get a digital currency that's based on gold. I was just talking to somebody who actually has that. You can actually get a credit card today, a credit card where you can go pay for your gas, and it charges you in gold, right? So what it does is you've got a gold account somewhere with a bunch of gold. It'll sell a bunch of gold into dollars, convert it into dollars, and pay the gas station. And you can use this account to load up on gold, but to buy and sell stuff, it's basically buying and selling, just like buying and selling gold. Now, I don't know how popular that's going to be in the world in which we live today. I don't think it's that popular, but because I think gold is too speculative today, just like Bitcoin. But in a true free market competition where people can use whatever money they want, I think, why would you choose Bitcoin over gold? What characteristics does Bitcoin have that you cannot have in gold? And gold has this massive advantage of being tangible and having value beyond the bits that represent it. Having value as a shiny, pretty thing. But let's get there. I might be wrong. I'm not saying I'm 100% here. There's a probability that I'm wrong, that Bitcoin wins. But my point is, you need a free market first. Then you can have the competition. Right now, there's no free market. There are no alternatives. There's no alternative money. There just isn't. So we can play pretend. We can imagine. We can hope that you can somehow have good money, but no political change. Bitcoin is not easier to take with you when you travel than gold. The reality is nobody actually lugs around gold with them. When I travel, I take a credit card, and that credit card is linked to my gold account. And when I pay with a credit card. So I don't need, my gold is held in a fortress somewhere, just as secure as Bitcoin is. Turns out Bitcoin can be stolen as well. So nobody travels with gold. You travel with what are called money substitutes. You travel with the proxy for that, and that's just as good as gold. You know. So, yes, more convenient to just carry your iPhone, but your iPhone can have all your gold on it. Now, it's true the gold has to sit somewhere. I guess there's a certain challenge of it sitting somewhere, but not in a free world where banks will have vaults. Although I was just talking to people about where they want to have their gold, and some people have it in Switzerland. I think you should have some of your gold if you have a lot of gold in Singapore, just to diversify geographically. So when they come and take it, you want some of your gold. You don't want your gold in the U.S. They've already confiscated the gold in the past in the U.S. It's true. It's much harder to confiscate Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is also a lot less useful. You can do a lot less with Bitcoin today. Yeah, I have no problem trusting a centralized entity that holds my gold in a free market. Bitcoin, I don't need to trust anybody. I can carry it on my stick, but that's incredibly inconvenient, and I will lose my stick, and I'll lose my passkey. I mean, one of the things people say, did you buy Bitcoin early on? And I have to admit that I'm happy I didn't, because I'm pretty sure if I'd bought Bitcoin in the first few years, I would have lost it. I would have forgotten the passkey. I would have trashed the hard drive. And today it would be worth, I don't know, gazillions of dollars, and I would have known I've thrown it away somewhere. I'm kidding, but there's some truth to that. I want a custodian. I have no problem in centralized custodians. Banks are incredibly useful. It's statism I'm afraid of. It's statist government I'm worried about. Not private enterprise that is storing my gold somewhere. I trust JP Morgan, not JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan, the guy, JP Morgan, the banker. I trust him. He can have, hold on to my gold. I'm sure it'll be there. So having a custodian is not a problem. Indeed, if you think about much of our lives, we trust entities. We buy insurance. We trust that they're going to be around and pay up when we die or when we get sick or when our car gets damaged. Our whole world is interrelated with a variety of different so-called custodials, so-called centralized entities. And I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's the problem we face. The problem we face is force, coercion. And the only entity that wields force and coercion is government. Don't trust government. Don't trust them. I don't want them to have more power. Don't want them to have more controls. In every realm, I want them to have less power, except in the one realm that is their responsibility, and that is the realm of protection. But even that, I'm dubious about what they're going to do with any resources they have in the world in which we live. They're probably going to use it to go after me, not to protect me. All right, we are pretty short of the 6:50 we're supposed to go to, so I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully, there's some people here who value this. I think no one says $20, 20 euro. Thank you. No. These discussions about currency are very valuable and deserve more funding. I appreciate that. Don't forget, Alexis did sponsor it, although I'm doing 2 shows, not 1, out of his sponsorship. But they are valuable, and I am being compensated for them. That's an easier word for me. All right. Let's see. Yeah, let's, there were these ChatGPT philosophical questions. Okay, here's ChatGPT was asked, what would you ask an objectivist philosophy about money? So here are the questions. How does an objectivist view the concept of fiat currency currently in the context of individual rights and free markets? Well, fiat currency is a violation of individual rights and free markets because it takes something that should be privately owned, whose value should be determined by the marketplace. And it basically centralizes it through the use of force and, puts it at the random, arbitrary authority of politicians or economists at the Fed, same thing. And you can't really compete against it. You can't challenge it. You can't replace it. Because they're basically nationalized money. They're basically taken over money and turned it into something that you are coerced into using. So it's a massive violation of individual rights. And of course, there cannot be free markets. As long as money is controlled by the government, there are no free markets. Markets are not free. Ayn Rand emphasized the importance of, these are good questions by ChatGPT. Ayn Rand emphasized the importance of objective value and rational self-interest. How does the existence of government-issued fiat currency like the US dollar fit into this perspective? Well, there cannot be an objective value when the value of the currency is basically dictated by central planners, by an authoritarian, force-based regime. So objective value is out of it, and one cannot fully pursue one's self-interest when one cannot engage in trade with an objective unit of account, with an objective means of exchange. You can still manage, you can still do the best that you can, but you can't fully manifest your self-interest in your life without freedom. And as long as the government controls the currency, we do not have freedom. All right, most of this is stuff that I think I've covered. If Alexis wants me to answer any more ChatGPT questions, he'll let me know. All right, let's see. James says, in regards to the power-lusting mindset, you've argued there are people out there who spend energy and stress running for political office just because they have low self-esteem and they desperately need to compensate by having power over others. All right, I guess this can be, you're phrasing it as a question. You're saying you're arguing, that's the question. Yes, I'm definitely arguing that. I'm arguing that many politicians either need power over others or they need to be in the limelight. They need to be in the spotlight. They need to be talked about. I think this is, for example, Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump has very low self-esteem. And he is desperate for attention. He's desperate to be in the limelight. He's desperate for people to talk about him. He's desperate for people to like him and love him, at least some people. But it's more than the love, it's the attention. It's to be the focal point, to be at the center of things, and that's what drives them. Others, I think Trump is a power luster, but I don't think that's the driving thing for him. I think somebody like like most other politicians, it's power. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read. You should read Alan Greenspan's biography, and you really get a sense of from Alan Greenspan of exactly this sense of what really drove him is the attention and the schmoozing with important people. And now he's not a politician, but it was this sense of power that he had that got him this attention, got him this, this esteem of others that he wouldn't have got just being an economic consultant. But he got it from being engaged in politics. But if you watch politicians, if you listen to politicians, what they enjoy is being in the center of attention and having power over other people. And some are worse than others. Some it's more the attention, some it's more the power. It could be flipped. Some are idealistic. Maybe they start out idealistic, left or right. They start out believing in some cause. And then they get there and the idealism is gone very quickly. And then it's just about the attention. It's about power. It's about the perks, a lot of perks. As I said, a lot of politicians enter poor, exit rich. You'll see AOC, whenever she leaves politics one day, is going to have a beautiful house in the Hamptons. And I'm not saying she's particularly corrupt. I just think this is how it works. One way or another, this is how it works. She'll get big speaking gigs. She'll get a book deal. She'll get whatever it takes to make big money. But she will get big money. They all do. Look at the Obamas. So I'm not saying every politician is like this, but most politicians, this is what drives them. Many of them are second-handed. Again, Trump is a great example of a second-handed person. Yeah, I mean, I think it's low self-esteem. Many of them have low self-esteem, and they compensate it by looking for power. And the kind of power you get in business requires too much of a first-handed approach to things. So if you have low self-esteem, you don't survive in business. It's very difficult. I guess some businessmen do, but it's very difficult. You have to have something. You have to have some independent mind. And you have to be able to stick to your evaluations, and your evaluations have to be linked to reality, at least in most businesses. Not all businesses. Marketing and things like that, maybe you can get away with just being a showman. I'm curious about this movie that just came out about Beanie Babies. You remember the Beanie Baby phenomena? I'm curious about the mentality of the people who came up with it, the mentality of the people who became rich probably from it. Never mind the mentality of the people who bought it. I said I'd run for president not if somebody gave me $100 million. I said I'd run for president if somebody raised $100 million in advance for my campaign. So I'm not going to run for office unless the money is there. And I don't think I can raise $100 million to run for office. So that's why I'm not even going to try. I mean, some people approach me about, you should run for office in California. I think this is about 2016. And I said, bring me $50 million, not for me to spend, for me to buy a house. No, for me to spend on the campaign, right? And I would do it. But I'm not going to spend years and years and years trying to raise the money, particularly given that I don't think I could. But yeah, I'm not saying everybody who runs for office is about power lust. I'd run for office for the fun of it. I think it would be fun. I'd lose. So I'm not worried about getting into power because, but it would just be fun to do. That's one of the reasons why I don't think I'll get $100 million, because I don't think I could convince donors that I could win. Right? All right, no one says the euro also has the problem that some European countries consistently ignore their debt ceiling without much consequences. If there was a way to reform the euro, if there was political will to do so. Yeah, but you can't reform the euro. It's still a fiat currency. It's still going to be dependent on somebody's whim, somebody's central planning, somebody's objective. It's not a market-driven currency. It's going to fail. It's not going to be successful. So euros, there's no tinkering you can do to make these things work. The euro is flawed not because of the debt ceiling. The euro is fundamentally flawed because a central bank issues it, and a bunch of economists using coercion really dictate its value, its quantity, its interest, its how you treat it, how you pay for it. And then the European Union has the added complication is that each government is issuing debt. Those debts are all different and they're all denominated in the same euro, and there's no one, in that sense, interest rate dictate all of them, and these countries cannot issue their own currency to back the debt. They have to rely on the central bank to do it. So it creates complexity. But the fundamental flaw is the same fundamental flaw it's always had, which is it's government money. All right, so we about $400 short of a goal. It really would be good to get to our goals on these shows. And I know somebody who's complained there is there is a kind of a budget, but I don't know how to communicate exactly the budgets with you. I'll have to think about how to communicate that, because I know some people were thinking, if I give more here, if I give more there, but there is a certain monthly amount that I need to raise through the monthly contributions and through this. And it needs to grow for now, because it's not covering all of expenses in terms of this being what I do in life. But so I'm just saying, we're still not raising enough money to cover all what we need to raise, but we're doing well. And if when we don't get enough on the super chat, that means we haven't made, even if we get everything based on the targets, we're still just there. All right. But the nice thing is the monthly is growing. I see more and more people joining Patreon and adding onto Patreon and to PayPal. So thank you, and I hope we keep seeing more of that. I know a lot of people listen who are not live contributors, who don't do the super chat, but do monthly contributions. And there's still hundreds of people out there who listen to the show regularly, maybe thousands, but hundreds certainly who don't yet. So there's a lot of upside, and I'm confident we are growing. I am confident we are growing. Yaron has a lot of opportunity costs. That is true. Although, it's not just monetary, it's also the fun and what you want to do in life. So this is what I want to do in life, and hopefully I can sustain an income from it. All right, not a lot of benevolence and idealism out there. Sad. Yeah, that's reality in the world today. Clark says, do you find the culture has more respect for the Fountainhead than Atlas Shrugged? It depends. It depends on the culture. I'd say generally people on the right have more respect for Atlas Shrugged. People on the center and left have more respect for the Fountainhead. People who are non-committal politically, more respect on the more lower the Fountainhead, I think. People who are more artistic inclined emphasize the Fountainhead. More economics, big picture of the world, more Atlas Shrugged. So it really varies. No, thank you. $50 or 50 Canadian dollars. I really appreciate it. Valuable show. It cleared the confusion about Brics, crypto, etc. Great. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad it did that. That doodle dandy. Is Immanuel Kant responsible for nasty YouTube comments? What is the psychology of people who leave mean and vicious anonymous comments on the internet? God, I mean, everything bad in the world is ultimately Immanuel Kant. But no, I mean, you can't think in those terms. People leave nasty comments on the internet because it costs them nothing. It's easy to do. It appeases the emotionalism. I think it's a reflection of the fact that people are emotionalists. People generally are it's much easier to be negative. It's much easier to criticize. It's much harder to compliment and thank you guys for being so supportive, because it is harder. We live in a culture where it's much easier. I think generally people have a negativity about the world and about life that, in some way comes from Plato and Kant and philosophy, but it really comes from their education. It comes from what we talked about, in the sense that, they don't understand the world, they don't get the world, and if you don't agree with them, that somehow offends them. This is the generation, right? Trigger warnings. You can't say anything that might offend them because they'll be triggered. So there are a lot of people out there triggered. I still get emails and commentary from people saying, I loved your shows until you started to be anti-Trump, and when are you going to see the light? And look, hasn't the last 5 years proved to you? It's like, God, what are you writing for me for? I mean, I talk about this every single day. I read the newspaper, God, every single day. I'm following the news. I'm analyzing everything. What are you writing? Just to, you're wrong, you're on, you're on, you're on, you're on. No, can't you see you're wrong? No, if I saw it, I'd see it. Right? So, I mean, it would be one thing if somebody wrote to me and said, all right, I get it. I get what you're saying, but here's an argument you've never thought of. But I've never seen that. All the arguments they give are arguments that are pretty self-evident. They want me to see what they see. Yeah, well, good luck. I can only see what I see. You can argue that I'm wrong, fine. But at some point you have to accept the fact that, I mean, unless you're making an argument. Here's an argument. You're wrong. Here's point A, point B, point C. Here are the things you're wrong. Where is that? And where's a new argument? Because I've got all the arguments. God, I've got all the left is worse. This is worse. Biden is the worst president in human history. I've heard all those. I've commented on them. I've responded to them. So you're not revealing anything new to me. What's it going to take to convince me to change my mind on Trump? Well, come up with something. But don't say the same old stuff that I've heard a million times. I've commented on it, responded to it, discussed. Or give up on me, which is fine too. Just say, Yaron's hopeless. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it. Goodbye. That makes sense to me. But to stick around and try this and try that in boring fashion, without doing anything new and challenging in a new way, I don't get it. People like to waste their times. So people are negative because we live in a culture of negativity. We live in a culture that believes in doom and gloom. We live in a culture that wants to blame the other for everything and something simple. Ideas are hard. It's hard to blame philosophy for the state of the world. Philosophy? How could a philosophy be responsible? I guess it's easy to say, well, Immanuel Kant did it. But it's we live in a world in which people don't understand what's going on around them. Things are not going well. They get a sense that things are not going well. They don't quite know what's going wrong. They get a sense things are not going well, and they want to lash out, and they're upset, and they're frustrated. And they're emotionalists because that's what our educational system has taught them to be connected to their emotion and to lash out emotionally, but not to be thoughtful, not to be rational, not to actually think through, not to actually think it through. All right, still looking for $50 or $20 questions that can keep us going here. We're almost out of questions. Catherine, just a thumbs up. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. WCZN from New Zealand. Thank you. Have you read A Positive Account of Property Rights by David Friedman? Oh, God. I haven't read that. I read David Friedman's Price Theory book. And I've read stuff on his defense of anarchy, and I've talked to David Friedman many times, or a few times, but I've not read A Positive Account of Property Rights. But my general sense with David Friedman is he's a super rationalist, and that I would probably not agree with his account of property rights. I can't quite articulate right now what his account would be, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to agree with it. Just based on the fact that I disagree with him on so many things. I agree with him on economics. When he presents an economic case, he's very good. But anything slightly philosophical, he just gets, he just abandons earth. P. Eddie says, thank you. This is an outstanding explanation of the dollar. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for the support. Okay, Demon has come in. This is looks like the last question, unless somebody else comes in really soon. Hey, Yaron, money has been tight, but want to say thank you. Money has been tight. Demon's money has been tight. Not that the money generally has been tight. Although the Fed is, doing quantitative. What do you call it? The opposite of easing. It's tightening the money supply. Has been. M2 has been going like this. But hey, Yaron, money has been tight, but I want to say thank you for the work you put into the show. There's been a true value. So here is the positive thing in the world and the good, and here's the positive things in the world and the good and the show gives. Thank you, Demon. I really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate all of your support. And yeah, don't worry. I know money is tight. I know for some of you the economy is not doing great. And you know, all I'm asking for is value for value, and that value is going to be very much determined by what you have. So don't stress if you cannot support the show a lot. I know I ask a lot. Maybe I should ask less, but I know I ask a lot. But don't really don't worry if you're not in a position to support the show, or not in a position to support the show as much as you'd like. All right, Dave, thank you for the support. Dave did a sticker. You can still do a sticker before you leave. Nick did a sticker. And, of course, Wes did $100. Thank you, Wes. Wes helped a lot in getting us to where we are, which is not quite where we need to be, but not bad. All right. Eduardo just did a sticker, another $10. So we're getting a lot of $10 stickers. This is great. Need another 35 of those, and we're good. Spyman has, I am someone who enjoys arguing, but I find that trying to argue with already indoctrinated fascists and communists is nigh impossible. They are completely anti-moral people. Do you see any point? No. I mean, if somebody truly is a fascist, or somebody truly is a communist, with everything we know about fascism and communism, and with everything fascism and communism imply in the world out there, then they're beyond hope. Then there's no point in the discussion. There's no point in arguing. There's no way you're not going to reach them, because they've already evaded so much to get to their position. Why would they not evade what you tell them? So what you want to find are people who are more questioning, more on the fringes, not committed to an ideology, but more searching, or more in an ideology like, I don't know, the mild conservatives, or they're liberals, or they're generally pro-science, they're generally pro-reason, they're trying to figure the world out. But once they're committed to something like fascism, or committed to something like communism, there's no point. It's just a waste of your energy, and it's a sacrifice for you. So stop doing it, because it's a waste of life. Why do it? Argue with the people who have hope, the people who have not committed to an evil ideology already. All right, Lewis says, I saw the documentary, The Prophecy of Ayn Rand. Yep. And it seemed like there was a lot of momentum with Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged. What happened? God. I mean, yes, there was a lot of momentum. I mean, the prophecy of Ayn Rand came out of the financial crisis and the Tea Party. And Ayn Rand was massive during the Tea Party. I mean, she was everywhere. And book sales were through the roof. And everybody was talking about her, and everybody was citing her. And it was this moment. But the problem was that the people who were citing her, and the people who were excited about her, were not intellectual about it. And they didn't understand. They didn't know what it really meant and what it really represented. And they thought that by electing, I don't know, Ted Cruz and what's his name in Florida, the Tea Party senators and the Tea Party congressmen, life was going to change. The world was going to change. We were going to have laissez-faire capitalism, and Ayn Rand's vision would come to life, because they didn't understand Ayn Rand's vision. They weren't willing to give up God, but they also were not willing to give up Medicare or Social Security. They weren't independent thinkers. And there was no, and they were confronted with, and they don't have to be intellectuals, but they were confronted with people who came to them and says, Ayn Rand, but remember God, and remember Medicare, and remember that you really love these things, and Constitution, it's great, but really, the Constitution doesn't provide for the things you love, so let's do the things you love. And they folded. Because they never were anchored. They never had a proper understanding. And the reality is that, I did a lot of Tea Party talks. God, dozens, well over 100. I did big ones, on the Washington Mall, in front of who knows how many people, anywhere from between 400,000 and 1 million people. It depends on who you talk to. But massive numbers of people, right? I talked to big auditoriums full in big Tea Party conferences. I talked to local chapters all over the United States. I talked to the Republican Party of Virginia invited me to give a talk at their convention. Can you imagine today? Today, they wouldn't touch me with a 10-foot pole. That was, Ayn Rand was flying high, the Tea Party was flying high, and I was a celebrity among these people. And I got a standing ovation at every single one of these talks. All of them. But it was me and a handful of others, maybe. Most of the people who spoke in front of the Tea Party were either religionists or populists or just conventional people. And then when the Tea Party elected those people to Congress, they didn't do the radical things that they wanted. So the Tea Party basically gave up. They really gave up when Obama won a second term. After 2012, it never was the same. And then by 2014, they were deeply eroded. And then Trump came. And then it's all over. And then it was all over. Because Trump basically told them, forget about, he's never said this in these words, but this is basically what he said. Forget about idealism. Forget about the Constitution. Forget about individualism and capitalism and freedom. Let's go smash the left. Let's go smash the people who you should hate. And I've talked about this many times. You should hate the other. You should hate because it's their fault. They've created this angst. They've created this anger. They've created this state of the world. This song about the rich man north of Richmond. Yeah, it's those people north. It's the elites that created this world. The Chinese created this world. It's the Mexican immigrants created this world. Let's go smash them. For what? What's the goal? What's the purpose? What are we going to do? Doesn't matter. We're going to smash them. For America first. We're going to make America great again. How? By smashing the left, by smashing the Mexicans, by smashing the Chinese, by smashing the elites. And the Tea Party was dead. The Tea Party had no answer to that. Had no balls, no backbone, no philosophical content. So they're not intellectuals. But they had to gravitate to intellectual leadership. And intellectual leadership, the reality is, wasn't there. Wasn't there? Glenn Beck flirted with Atlas Shrugged, but wouldn't give up his Christianity and wouldn't give up his weirdness and tried to stand up to Trump. Tried to stick to those principles, and his audience stabbed him in the back when he did that. And by the time Trump was in office, Glenn Beck became his biggest fan. Rush Limbaugh was never hugely into Ayn Rand. He cited her here and there. He talked about it a little bit, but Rush was too smart. He realized, no, Ayn Rand's too idealistic, too principled. I can't really support her. It's too much against what this political party or what my listeners really want. So they all gave lip service to Ayn Rand and then undermined her and undercut her. And there was no intellectual leadership for liberty. There was no intellectual leadership for freedom. You know, people tried. I tried. People like Matt Kibbe tried, although, you know, not an objectivist, but friendly. You know, so the better elements within the Libertarian Party tried, not party, but within the Libertarian movement tried. Not many of them. There wasn't that many. I didn't encounter that many libertarians in the Tea Party when I was on the road with the Tea Party. People tried, but, you know, some of us tried, but too little, too few of us, and didn't connect with the audience. The other thing with the Tea Party is, and this is true of Trump, it attracted old people. You know, attracted some young people. It attracted a lot of old people. And old people didn't want objectivism. They didn't really want Ayn Rand. They read Atlas Shrugged. They love Atlas Shrugged. They thought Atlas Shrugged was pro-Republican. They didn't understand Atlas Shrugged in any kind of philosophical, intellectual sense. And the young people who came in afterwards, you know, this was, I mean, the Charlie Cooks of the world. For him, this was a massive power opportunity to capture power. He was a huge Ayn Rand fan and gave it up because the power wasn't there. That wasn't where you got the power. Wasn't where you got the influence. You got the influence by being a populist, by riding on the wagon with Donald Trump. That's how you got influence. And if Donald Trump becomes president, again, Charlie Cook will get a cabinet position. Who knows where Charlie Cook will go? So, you know, too soon. I mean, that's a long answer, but it was too soon. And the energy and excitement and interest unfocused and by the wrong people. We need, first and foremost, we need intellectuals. Before we get masses, before we get a lot of people, we need intellectuals, and we need a lot of them. So when the next Tea Party happens, when the next round of interest in Ayn Rand, there are hundreds of us out there hustling, out there presenting the ideas. And that's what the Ayn Rand Institute is trying to do, is to create the hundreds of intellectuals in the future. And they're coming. You're going to see them coming. I mean, it's very, very, very exciting to see the number of people we're training right now and the number of people who are pretty good. Still young with huge amount of potential, huge amounts of energy. All right, Jennifer says, is there such a thing as overthinking something? Yeah. And there's a sense in which that's true. I mean, you're playing tennis. You can overthink your forehand. You can overthink it. You know, once you automatize something, there's certain things in life that you have to automatize. And you want to think about them and help figure out how to, but once you automatize them, if you start thinking about, I have to straighten my arm, you hesitate and you don't let what you've automatized kick in. You can see that also sometimes in driving. If you've automatized driving, it just goes smoothly. It's all there. You can, you know, I tell them when you can do the same thing in public speaking. You can start overthinking it. What did I just say? What am I going to say? What's the next point going to be? You're on stage. The thinking was done before. The thinking is done. If you start thinking now, you're gonna be terrible. You gotta let it flow. And yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, but you can't monitor everything and correct everything and fix everything by thinking it constantly. So in that sense, there's overthinking. In those activities where you've automatized something and that something relies on it being automated, right? You don't hit a tennis ball thinking, okay, I need to take this stance, I need to put my hand back, and you just hit it. And you've done the thinking in the past. You've done the practicing and the thinking, and it's automated. And the same with public speaking. The same, the show. I don't have time to think about every point you make, right? I mean, you ask me something, and I have to trust my subconscious to feed me relevant material, and that I've done the thinking that'll make it possible for me. And this is why it's very possible that I say things once in a while that are wrong, because I haven't thought it completely out, and my subconscious might be feeding me something wrong. Anyway, that's what I think in terms of overthinking. So context. Ginger asks, no question unless you want to say something about Nikki Halley. Just enjoying that I finally managed to catch you live. Thank you, Ginger. Really appreciate it. I like Nikki Halley. Can she be successful? I really don't know. I don't see how. It's just the deck is so stacked against her and against anybody sane in the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party has become a party of, in a sense, insanity. And it's not focused on the right things. The debate is not. Nikki Haley's good on foreign policy. Nikki Haley's good on at least a semblance of, free markets. Semblance, right? She's not truly a capitalist, but a semblance of. And those are not the issues right now. So Nikki Haley, the way she spins it right now is she's all about China. China's horrible. China's this. China's that. And making a whole campaign around China, which is a way for her to hook into the China hatred that exists out there, that is really being established, and a way for her to, present that anger that people want their representatives to have. But she's not an angry person. So she doesn't have the what do you call it? Personality to run right now, and she doesn't have the content. She's not a cultural issue warrior, cultural thing all about trans and talk day and night about drag shows, and she's not angry. See, the leading candidates are angry, and one of the reasons Vivek, I think, is doing well is that Vivek has managed to combine the right kind of emphasis on social policy that people want to hear without being too angry, and still being positive about America and having a positive vision about America, and still having some semblance of a free market. He believes in some free market, not much. But Vivek by far is the most interesting and the most charismatic out there, other than Trump. DeSantis gets the votes based on his record in Florida and his reputation, but he can't win. There's no way he can win. And Vivek is interesting and exciting and charismatic and wrong about a lot of things. But charisma goes a long way, and DeSantis has none. And I think Nikki Haley has the wrong kind. She's too positive, and she's too focused on the right things. And people don't want to talk about the right things. People don't want to talk about the right things. Nibulski. No E at the Nibulsk. Should amendments to state constitutions be subject to simple 50% majority vote? I was torn on issue 1 in Ohio. I support abortion rights, but don't think people should be able to vote my rights away with a simple majority. I agree, but the reality is that Ohio Constitution can be changed today by a majority of 50 votes. And this has been the same way for a very long time, as far as I understand. And the only reason Republicans wanted to change it, literally the only reason, they can pretend that there are other reasons, but the only reasons they wanted to do it is to prevent a pro-abortion amendment passing. In that context, you have to vote against issue 1. I wouldn't be torn at all. You have to protect the right to abortion. And then afterwards, after you've changed the Constitution to protect the right of abortion, you can fight over the 60%. Now, if it was 60% now, and this was about lowering it to 50, then I'd agree with you. But it's 50% is the status quo. This is where it is. You're not making it worse. You're just preventing the Republicans from manipulating the system to get a violation of individual rights passed. So that's my views on that. All right, Frank says, in Treasure of Sierra Madre, what would the prospectors have done with their gold dust and the story had ended without any problems? What would the prospectors have done with the gold dust and the story had ended without any problems? I don't understand the question. So it didn't, because they wanted each other's gold, and you know, if I remember right, so it's a long time since I told the story. I mean, what they should have done with the gold dust is put it in a bank and, bought something with it, done something with it, used it. Instead, they coveted each other's and they fought about it. They lusted each other's gold dust. So, I mean, yeah, protect it. Eduardo, meant to ask, I've read most of Rand's fiction except We the Living and the Posthumanist release. What's another fiction recommendation you'd give? Of Ayn Rand's or generally? You should definitely read We the Living, right? And then go see the movie. We'll actually have Duncan Scott next Thursday, the guy who's producing the beautified, the edited and improved version of We the Living that's hitting the theaters now, and hitting Blu-ray and hopefully streaming services now. He'll be on the show to tell the story of We the Living, the movie. So definitely read the book. I'd read, if you're asking about other authors, I would definitely read Victor Hugo. I'd read 19th century romantics. It depends what you like, but Hugo is the best. Dostoevsky is very dark, but very interesting. And then there's a lot of 19th century, just fun, adventure, exciting kind of story books. I don't know, the guys who wrote The Three Musketeers, the guy who wrote Ivanhoe, the guy who wrote Scaramouche, and I can't remember author's name, so I apologize. But 19th century is the best period. And then if you read the Romantic Manifesto, Ayn Rand has a bunch of recommendations in terms of authors she likes. I can't remember if Leonard Peikoff has any recommendations, but just try to find romantic literature, but great literature. Hugo is the obvious next choice. There's a lot of short stories that are good by others. Thank you. Jennifer says Dumas. That's the Three Musketeers. So Walter Scott. So Walter Scott is good. I forget who wrote Scaramouche, and he has a lot of books, and I read a lot of his books. Raphael Sabatini, thank you. Kudababa. Raphael Sabatini. I enjoyed his books. Not everybody likes them, but I enjoyed them. Scott, of course, wrote Ivanhoe. I love Ivanhoe. Leonard, but Peikoff doesn't like Ivanhoe. So, there's another issue Leonard Peikoff and I disagree about. We disagree about Ivanhoe. I don't know why he doesn't like Ivanhoe. I remember we talked about it, but I don't remember how we got it. Anyway, find the literature you like, but the 19th century generally had a good set of good romantic literature. I'm certainly no expert on literature. Yeah, Captain Blood by Sabatini is a lot of fun. It's very good. It's a great character. I've got a whole bookshelf here of Sabatini books because I enjoyed them so much. Spyman says, do you think that ARI is lacking in any particular area on the content creation side of things? What do you think of Atlas Society's presence? Yeah, I think ARI is lacking in a million, in dozens of areas. Oh, Never Shoot. Good one. Good one, Bonnie. Read Neville Shoot. I love Neville Shoot. He's so benevolent. Oh, God. Neville Shoot. So S-H-U-T-E. Ayn Rand loved Neville Shoot. Yeah. Do you think ARI is lacking in a particular area of content? Yeah, a lot. I mean, everything, commentary on every aspect of the culture, we're still lacking. So ARI needs 200 intellectuals all commenting on what's going on in the world. We need experts on economics. We need experts on immigration. We've got now Augustina. We need experts on education. We need experts on healthcare, on why the FDA is evil. I just talked to a guy, I'm mentoring a guy at the Ayn Rand Institute who's going to become an expert on if the FDA. So we're going to get them, but you need to train them, and it takes years to train them. But we need lots of experts. We need Alex Epsteins for every part of the economy, every part of the culture. And then on top of that, you need philosophers like Ankagate. Then you need generalists, communicators like me. You just need a lot of people. You need numbers matter. Numbers matter when it comes to intellectuals. It doesn't mean you need to be a majority, but in the intellectual realm, you have to have a significant number, a significant presence. Spyman also, and what do I think of the Atlas Society presence? I really don't think of the Atlas Society, period. What presence they have? Upjasinski writes something periodically. A lot of his stuff is good. Richard Salzman writes something for them once in a while. It's usually terrible. Who else do they have? I don't know what they do. I don't know what they have. I don't know what happens there. It's a black box. And I don't care, is more importantly. I just don't follow. I don't think of them. Oops, Spyman asked the second question. Last question. Do you think, it doesn't have to be the last question. You can still ask more. Last question, but do you think Elon Musk is a money appropriator creator? I have trouble respecting his achievement with EVs considering the market coercion going on in the automotive industry. Look, I think he's both. I think he's certainly created value. I think he certainly has a knack for innovation, a certain managerial style that's very conducive to innovation. He's a healthy risk taker and a wealth creator. But he's also a wealth expropriator. He does both. I mean, you can hold both. He certainly received subsidies and certainly received help from the government with Tesla. And the whole climate change obsession is really helping him with Tesla. Look, at the end of the day, would SpaceX be as successful as it is without government contracts? Government contracts that some of them are legit for defense, some of them not legit in terms of the role of government. His solar panel business was never very successful. His tunneling business, we'll see. But he's definitely an interesting entrepreneur. He's a thinker. He's got a unique management style that's produced great results. So he's definitely some of both. I think there are periods where I respect his achievements when he highlights that. The periods where I don't, where he doesn't put forward his best, and that I think that's happening more recently with Twitter. So he's a mixed bag, like most people in the world in which we live, and particularly most businessmen in our world in which we live. Maximux, we're still about $200 short, just in case anybody wants to step in with something. Putting the current war aside, why isn't the West capable of working together with China and Russia? It just seems like everyone wants control. Well, no. I mean, look, you can't work with evil. And authoritarianism is evil. Putin is evil. He's not a good guy. And you can't work with, he's a murderer. He's a murderer on a scale that no American politician is. You don't work with murderers. Xi, the Chinese regime, are murderers. they're authoritarians. They're central planners. They're much worse than America. They're not just slightly darker shade of gray. America's fundamentally a free country. Russia and China fundamentally unfree countries. How much can you work with that? I mean, if there's a serial killer on your block, do you work with him? Compromise with him? Figure stuff out? If there's no way to get rid of him, then you shun him. But you don't work with him. So there's no working together with evil regimes, and these are evil regimes. Now, what you should do with them is an upward question. I've often discussed it. We could do a whole show on that. Somebody could sponsor a show on that. How should we treat China and Russia as a country? And you as an individual should think about whether you want to trade with China. Do you want to help China be China? And trading with them helps them to some extent. Now, my evaluation of China has changed over the years. I think people's evaluation of Russia has changed over the years. And because the regimes have changed, they've acted differently, they've changed. But you need to decide as an individual whether to trade. It shouldn't be the government's job to tell you who you trade with or who doesn't, unless you deem either China or Russia an enemy of the United States. And then the government dictates whether you trade with them or not. Ali says, Yaron, the only thing I don't like about objectivism is idealizing people like Elon Musk. I call him puppet master since he can easily manipulate Republican base. He really doesn't adopt objectivist value. I mean, I agree with you. I don't idealize Elon Musk. Sometimes he doesn't say things that are amazing. And then, wow, I mean, he was great on certain things during COVID. The way he runs SpaceX, the way he's experimented with rocket launches, the way, he's built Tesla, put aside the subsidies. I mean, that's impressive, and I admire that. And at the same time, I think he's, in some ways, a kook. And I agree with you about the manipulating the Republican base and not adopting objective value. I agree with you completely, and I criticize him when that happens. So I don't think objectivism doesn't idealize Elon Musk. Objectivists might admire him, or might admire certain aspects of him, but certainly shouldn't idolize him. And I don't think we do. Certainly not Elon Musk, who's a very mixed character, as we've been discovering on almost a daily basis. But there's no businessman today that you should idealize. I mean, as all around, because they all have a variety of contradictory things going on. All right, Andrew, question, is there any hope left? Rand, paraphrasing Rand, quote, there's hope as long as there's one rational man still living on earth. I like the answer instinctively, but analytically, how do you interpret what she means? Well, what she means is as long as there's somebody who can discover the truth and then communicate with others. That is, as long as people have free will, and as long as somebody is still rational, somebody can communicate good ideas, there's a chance of converting somebody else to being rational. So it's one mind at a time. One mind at a time. And you can't forget that. It's not, force doesn't work. You can't coerce people to be good. You can't coerce people to be capitalist. You can't force them to be right. You can't force them to be rational. It's one mind at a time. One convincing one mind. You can't manipulate them. You can't force them. You can't, you just have to convince. You have to convince. And that takes time. And it takes one mind at a time. There are no shortcuts. All right. It's late. It's 10:30 over here. I will see you all maybe Thursday. but certainly on Friday. I'm out tomorrow, so please don't get withdrawal from just one day. But I will, maybe I'll do a show Thursday. We'll see. 2 shows on Friday, one in the morning, one in the noon time frame, news, and an evening show topic to be determined. I still want to do this alienation stuff, but we'll see when exactly. And then I got another topic on Saturday. So I'm looking for topics. And if anybody wants to offer suggestions for topics, I'm open to that. Videos for me to comment on, I'm open to that. Anybody wants to sponsor shows, really open to that. So please do so. Send me emails. Sponsorships would be great. Yeah, we got lots of shows still to do. Hundreds of them, thousands of them maybe, in the world to come. Ali says, Ali's not giving up. He's not letting me go to sleep. Ali says, Jordan Peterson, on one of his interviews, answered a question regarding mystical story in the Bible. If it should be subject to rational and reason. His answer that these stories are above human understanding and have to be taken as is. But that's ridiculous. What does as is even mean? There is no as is. Every story needs to be understood. Every story is understood in some way. And to a large extent, the story is understood in the context of the philosophy you already hold. There is no intrinsic value in the story. The story is interpreted by you, by your mind, based on your ideas, based on the philosophy you already have. And of course, nothing should be beyond reason and rationality. And these stories, because they're so influential, must be analyzed from the perspective of reason and rationality and from the perspective of, are they pro-life or anti-life? Are they pro-human life or anti-human life? Most of them are anti-human life. And that's important to understand so that you know what to do with the stories, because you're going to do something with the stories. Do you want the stories to impact you? Do you want the stories to motivate you? Do you want the stories to inspire you? Whoa! Not if they're anti-human life. I don't want that. So this idea that something is above human understanding and yet is a creation of human beings, is above human understanding and yet needs to be understood by human beings, it's just bizarre and silly and stupid. And it comes from this the Platonic nature of Jordan Peterson's thought. That is, for him, truth and reality and true reality comes from another dimension and are imprinted on us through revelation, not through understanding. Truth is not something we understand. Truth is something that's imprinted on us through some form of Platonic revelation. And that's mysticism, and that's nonsense, and that's wrong, and that's the problem with Jordan. Jordan is such a mixture. I still watch some of his old videos, and sometimes he says things that are spot on, brilliant, absolutely right. And then he says things that are completely wrong, completely nuts. And the deeper you go philosophically, the more wrong he gets. Whew, I'm exhausted. All right, thank you, people. I appreciate it, all of you. Thanks, Ali, for coming in at the end with some questions, and Andrew as well. We're still short of our 650 goal, but we got a lot closer than I thought we were going to get. I will, as I said, I will be back with you guys on Friday. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the support. And don't forget to like the show. I was reading, YouTube sent me these are the things that help promote your show and get more viewership. It's when the people who watch your show like the show. It's when they share it. It's when they comment. It's when they do stuff with it. So please, 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 several hundred people watched the show while we were live. There should be several hundred likes if you liked it. It's a click. It's an easy click of the button. It's not going to cost you anything. Just press the thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm. If you want these ideas to get out there, if you want the channel to grow, help me grow the channel by liking, sharing, commenting, doing all the stuff that you do on social media that gets you this kind of stuff on social media. All right. Thank you all. I will see you all. And don't forget, you can support the show monthly on Patreon or PayPal, yaronbrookshow.com/support. Bye.